Yeah, I mean, one of the things I stumbled across, I mean, at the end of the Apocalypse Never, in the False Gods for Lost Souls chapter, I talk about how I myself was depressed at a period when I was drawn towards apocalyptic environmentalism. So I think there's an interesting question of, is apocalyptic environmentalism depressing, or are depressed people attracted to apocalyptic environmentalism, or both, of course? I stumbled across the work of Aaron Beck, who, the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the founders. And I was struck that the three structures of depressed people that he identified, I'm a terrible person, the world is a terrible place, and the future is bleak, that's the exact same three structures of every environmental narrative. So every environmental narrative is that humans are terrible, cancer on the planet, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and the future is not, the end is nigh. And that struck me.
Yeah, well, so that's a very interesting observation, especially in relationship to your comments about school children. And so perhaps driving those three axioms home, emphatically and forcefully isn't the wisest thing to be doing to young children. And the fact of that overlap with depressive thinking. I mean, Beck's no small figure in the history of psychological thinking. He's also extraordinarily practical, as is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it also, as a psychological philosophy, or as a branch of medicine even, one of the things the cognitive behaviorists are really, really good at, and I did this in my clinical practice, is to take those vague depressive apprehensions and then break them down into micro problems that can actually be addressed. And that's much less depressing. It's like, well, exactly why is the future so depressing as far as you're concerned? Like in some detail, not vague. Look, if you're going to run away from something because it hurts and it's dangerous, it doesn't really matter if you have a vague conception of it, right? But if you're going to face it and confront it and solve it, let's say, then you can't be vague about it. And that's also good for your mental health. That approach, orientation is directly linked biochemically and neurophysiologically to positive emotion. So the process of decomposing these terrible abstract problems into solvable microproblems actually facilitates positive emotion and suppresses anxiety. And so it is very interesting overlap there. And it's worth thinking about.
I viewed Apocalypse Never as cognitive behavioral therapy, both for myself but for other people. And in fact, the highest praise I received from people is people who told me that they were very depressed about the environment, and then they read Apocalypse Never and they felt much better. And so I think you have to do both things. Like, as you pointed out, cognitive behavioral therapy Beck's therapy was, you have to be very concrete about why you're a good person, why the world is a good place, and why the future is bright. You have to be very specific about it. It has to be it has to be evidence-based. It can't be fantasy land.
It has to be actionable as well. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting, because I certainly didn't get that sense reading the book, although illuminating the fact that the problems that beset us globally and individually are actually actionable and aren't so dismal when you look at them in detail, and are also complex in weirdly interesting ways. It's not surprising that has positive psychological consequences. I mean, I certainly was pleased, for example, by your discussion of plastics. I've been following the work of this Dutch kid. I don't remember his name, but he's built this gadget for gathering plastic, which is quite cool. And I didn't know that the evidence for the decomposition of plastics was as robust as you describe in the book. So I thought, hey, isn't that good? That's a positive thing to see. And I saw many examples of that in the book, that things aren't as bad as we think. So